Hey guys, so this is going to be Chapter 8, Printmaking lecture. So we're going to actually start off with this piece here. And I've been having trouble with my screen recorder, so I'm sorry I'm having to do this, but I might actually have to leave it in this kind of a view instead of making it larger so that I can keep an eye on my clock for this particular lecture. Not sure why it's happening, but anyway, let's just get into this. So here's an example of a print. This is actually a lithograph print. Let me move my camera here. Oops. And as you can see, it depicts a dragonfly kind of over here. There's a radio tower here, and then there's just different colors. So there's this rusty red, this green, this blue, and this tan color in the background. Each layer has its own color, and overall the work is really a meditation on the delicate objects or structures that might quiver in a strong wind. So that's probably why it's called quiver. And the layering of colors in this artwork is meant to represent the process of memory. So each of our memory inhabits different layers in our mind, and each has its own feeling or association with it. So the artist Tanja Softic, she actually created quiver, and she makes these visual poems, and she chose the printmaking technique specifically to make this piece because she wanted to use that layering process that it's so good at to represent the layers in our mind and the memories in our mind. So that's kind of why she chose the lithograph printmaking process. She's really using the medium to back up the content of the piece, which is a representation of our memory and the layers of our memory. So moving on. A print is an artwork that exists in multiple copies. A print is thus one of a series of nearly identical pieces, usually printed on paper. And prints are made from a matrix, and the plural is matrices. And it can be made from metal, wood, or stone, typically. And the matrix actually carries the ink. So the artist really works on this matrix, and then they ink it, and then they put paper over the top of it to create the actual printed design on paper. And a group of images from the same matrix is actually called an edition. And the prints are often referred to as editioned works. And prints are usually always numbered to indicate the total quantity of prints pulled or printed in each edition. So sometimes you might see like a 6, like the fraction of 6 over 50. And that indicates that it's the 6th print pulled from an edition of 50 total prints from one single set of matrices. And artists usually sign and number prints. And sometimes they make prints called progressive proofs at various stages to see how the image on the matrix is developing. And then once they get to a satisfactory stage with that matrix and they're done working on getting it where they need it to be, they will actually make a few prints just to keep for a personal record, and those are called artist proofs, and they're typically marked with an AP, which indicates that the matrix is now at a satisfactory stage. And these typically aren't sold, not saying that that hasn't happened before, but so it's said that the printmaking process can be defined as works of art with siblings, but they are all original and they all mimic what we are as humans. So we're all the same, but we're slightly different. So each one of the prints that you get, even from a single matrix, will be slightly different, but yet very much the same. So let's do a little bit of history on printmaking here. It actually originated in China in the 9th century. And by the 11th century, they had actually in China developed movable type, and they're using wood. And wood had its limitations, but the movable type was really a huge step in the bookmaking process. So in order to make books, you didn't have to have somebody, a scribe there, creating handwritten books. And scribes were traditionally employed to make books, but once movable type was made in China, that was a huge advancement because they could make a lot more books a lot faster, a lot cheaper. And actually in Europe, printmaking didn't really develop until the 15th century, and it was typically used to make religious images and to illustrate books printed with a new European metal movable type. So in China they're using wood, but in Europe in the 15th century they invented an even better form of movable type that's made from metal. And metal was superior to wood because wood would actually, it's so absorbent that it wears down and you can't use it as much as metal. And then also metal has more detail, so you can actually shrink down the size of the letters and you can put more text on a page, and you can create more editions of a page so that they are able to make more books more cheaply, and there's less labor involved. And as a result, books are more available, they're cheaper, and literacy levels really start to jump up after this stage. That metal movable type comes out in Europe, actually started in Germany, and then kind of moved throughout the continent and throughout the world from there. So as recently as the 18th century, printmakers were needed to copy drawings and paintings and to make plates for illustrating newspapers or books. So they didn't have photography, so they used artists to create drawings or some sort of printmaking process to show an image, basically. So they don't have photography at this time. But once photography comes out, the printmaking processes end up getting taken over by photography, and a lot of the printmaking processes become somewhat obsolete. So generally artists make prints for the following reasons. So they wish to make multiple works that are less expensive than their paintings or sculpture, so that their work is actually more purchasable by a wider group of people. Maybe people don't have enough money to buy paintings, but they can buy a print. Also, artists might wish to influence social causes. So prints are, done in multiples. They're easy to distribute far and wide. And so they are great medium for a social cause, basically. Another reason why they might want to create prints is they're fascinated by the process of printmaking. It's just very an absorbing craft, and they enjoy the craft. So the first type of printmaking we're going to talk about, it's kind of an umbrella term. A lot of different processes more kind of fall underneath this, but it's called the relief print is one of the processes we're going to talk about. And in this process, the artist creates a matrix by cutting away all the parts of the printing surface not meant to carry ink. And this leaves the design in relief, or actually sticking out at the surface of the original surface of the matrix. So basically they're carving away all the spots that they don't want to show up in the print. And then they ink the remaining places and press the paper to that, and that's called relief. So woodcut is actually a type of relief print, and it's made with the material of wood specifically. And they're definitely the oldest type of relief print. And it really lends itself to bold blocks of color. So let me show you this before I continue on here. So this is the relief process. So here's the paper, the printing surface that they're going to make the design on it ultimately. This is the chunk of wood that they're using. And then they carve away, the artist carves away at the surface. So you can see all the carved away parts. And then the parts that are left up here at the original surface level of the wood, where it used to be, is inked, and then the paper is pressed to that. So that's relief. And it's not always done in wood. It can be done with other materials as well. But we're going to talk about wood block first. And it lends itself to a lot of black and white contrast, lends itself to really bold blocks of color. And artists that are drawn to it are usually generally drawn to working with solid areas of color. And they also enjoy carving wood. A lot of people just enjoy the feel of wood underneath their hands and the smell of it. And woodcut editions are limited to a couple hundred because the relief edges begin to deteriorate with the repeated pressure of the printing process. And wood is absorbent, so it absorbs a lot of the inks and stuff, and it starts to break down. So you can only get a few hundred editions from wood block printing. So with wood block printing, each color gets its own block, but they're printed on the same piece of paper, one by one, and they're carefully aligned. Each block, each color is carefully aligned on top of each other. And this is known as registration. So the alignment of the blocks of color to create the final work is called registration. And so we'll look at a piece of woodblock print from an Asian artist. So this actually flourished in Asia, but it flourished in Japan as well from the 17th to the 19th century. And multiple blocks were used to achieve highly integrated color effects. So each block was its own color, but they were able to do this in a really successful way. It's definitely a preferred method of the middle class, and subject matter ranges from theaters, actors, landscape, erotic images. So we're going to talk about Utagawa Hiroshige's piece right here, Light Rain at Shono. Oops. I'm going to try and move my window here. But in this piece, you can see there's a lot of color here. This print actually required 4 blocks, one for each of the 4 colors. And the atmospherics of the effects of the rain and the distant forests are pretty delicate, and you can see that he's able to achieve a high level of detail in this piece, even with wood. And he created a lot of fine lines in this work that would have been hard to line up correctly. So the registration with this piece required a lot of skill. And this work is one of 53 that Hiroshige made that depicts various stops along the road from Edo to Kyoto. And this is the most popular of the series of 53 that he made. And this one's actually numbered 46. I don't know what the total was of the editions that were pulled, but it's number 46. Now, if that was a fraction, we'd know that it was number 46 out of 200 prints pulled or whatever, but we only know that it's number 46, probably because of its age. It's from 1832 through 33. So let's move on. So Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, Port Scene, 1908, woodcut. So we're going to take another look at a woodcut. It's different in style from the previous piece. It has a real roughness to it, and it's called Port Scene, and it was done in 1908, and it's kind of indecipherable at first, but it does depict a harbor with sailboats that kind of have these the cast of their masts in kind of the water's surface, basically. So we can see those masts going downward. And we can really see the texture of the matrix in this work, so the texture of the wood in this work that he gouged and hacked into. Most of the strokes in this piece go vertically, and the grain of the woodblock is probably vertical as well. And he really used a lot of expressive technique, and it's really a revolt against the highly polished and subtle effects that many other European printmakers were seeking in these days. So it's actually a revolt against the really highly polished pieces that were really common. He's really being more expressive with this work and really expressing the material itself, the wood itself in this piece. And the next thing we'll talk about is wood engraving. I'm going to leave this up to the next video though.